Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
Hello everyone, it's Koos here. I hope that you find this series interesting. I've had a lot of fun making it, I can tell you. And in this video, we're going to talk about the Lima and the Stockholm Syndrome. And once again, whether you should escape or should escape not, because there are legal consequences. But before we start with this, I want to just once again say to you, look, there's disclaimers here. We are not liable for you. Even if you follow whatever we told you to do here and suggested, it's a changing environment. And so we cannot be held liable for anything you do or don't do. So just be clear on that. We're trying to assist. But it is a world which changes every now and then. That is why it's so important. So important that the debriefing phase, that is done properly by proper people and that you then implement whatever you've learned from that. Problem with that also is that the debriefings are sometimes classified secret, and so we don't really need or come to the people who really need them to know about these things, but that's just life, that's just the way it is. I also want to urge you, read my books, read the GMJ books, and you will find a lot of the stuff I'm talking about here being described in great detail. And in those books, whatever is described like that, you can take for granted it was thoroughly researched and it is 100% correct from a viewpoint of history as well as the tradecraft, the tricks of the trade, things like that is perfect in there. Those books have absolutely saved a lot of lives, so I'm very proud of it because they like no other. They really like no other book you've ever read in your life. It's as most people, even special forces people, say to me, because we don't really know where's fiction and where's not fiction because it's written as if it's non-fiction. In the sense that whatever happens there is totally believable, because most of it was based on either things which did happen, disguised, of course, or it was training scenarios. So yeah, it's very. No one reads a GMJ book without learning something. That's the one constant feedback we get. But certainly, because the characters are South Africans, they will never go mainstream. To go mainstream, you have to be Americans, the main characters, and you have to have a lot of sex and things like that. There's no sex in those books. I think in one of the books, the two main characters actually grab each other just before marriage, and it's described in one sentence. That night, Angelique and I became one. Boom. Because the books are not Mills and Boons. It's not about that. It's about teaching. It is actually teaching whatever you learned here at this hostage lecture, you can learn in great detail about anything you can imagine, from sniping to parachuting, including all the phases, Halo, AO, static line, whatever, covert operations, whatever, they're all in those books. And of course, 3 of them deal with hostage rescues. The big one is codenamed Wrangler, which deals with an aircraft which has taken a C-130, the civilian version of it, the L-100, and it's filled with snakes. And these people, these eco-terrorists, by which we include Greenpeace, by the way. Greenpeace is listed on the FBI list as a terrorist organization, or it used to be. Might still be, I don't know. But that's what I've heard, that's what I was told. And I actually absolutely know why, because they act like flippin' hooligans and terrorists at times. And then in that book, in Codename Wrangler, they threaten to release those snakes and they threaten to kill people. And then, of course, it's not so easy to storm a C-130 freight aircraft. Actually, a Boeing or Airbus is much easier because you can approach it. Interestingly enough, when I spoke to Colonel Maritz van Zyl, who was the only man who actually served in the Railway Police Special Task Force, who was a fantastic unit which Andre Willifeer created and commanded. And the second, he also served in the South African Police Force Special Task Force. He made both selections. Only man ever to have done it. Was also a fantastic unit. I mean, those guys are just excellent. The Special Forces, end of story. By Special Forces themselves, and this especially good. And Maurits van Zyl, I think, was the guy who shot the terrorist in the head, and then he thought the guy was dead, and he threw him out of the aircraft, and then the guy became alive again. And so they changed the ammunition. He talks about it in his episode. And he's also the only man who we introduced in training how to rescue military type of aircraft like the C-130, which is very interesting because when I wrote the book, I had no idea that Maurits was behind it. Small world. But now let us talk about the Stockholm Syndrome and the Lima Syndrome. Now, I think anybody and everybody knows something about the Stockholm Syndrome. And if you go on YouTube and the internet, you will find a lot of psychologists, very clever people, of course, who add a little bit on why it happens to you and so forth. I'm not going into that because for me it is unimportant why. What is important to me is that you, as a hostage, remember we're talking here worst case scenario. So it's interesting. So it's for me it's interesting and also very important that you, as a hostage, because you're taken now, you're hostage. That's what the course is about. That you understand that something can change in you, that something can happen in your brain, that you somehow begin to like your hostage takers. There's like a relationship between you. And you don't blame them anymore for taking you hostage and keeping you away from your children and abusing you. Man, it's weird. But I will say that almost 90% of you listening here, you actually suffer of that. Because I hear you speak. And when you say to me that, you know, that sergeant or corporal or Tom Cop or whatever his name was, yeah, he was such an asshole, you know, but he was actually a good man. Boom, boom, bing, bing, bing. You're suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. There's no logical reason for you to like your drill sergeant or your corporal unless he did a very shitty job. He should be disliked. But that's not to say that he should be hated or not respected. There's a subtle difference, if you understand what I mean. So be very aware of that. The moment you start liking people you shouldn't like, you might be suffering mild symptoms of a Stockholm Syndrome. And of course, the Stockholm Syndrome itself comes from Stockholm, I think in Sweden, country which recently joined NATO. Good luck with that. It's going to cost you very dearly, but you know, we'll have problems in life. I remember finding the ABBA donated food. Do you remember that? You know? And donated by this and donated by that. Who was the other guys who did it? Those who sang that album, The Joshua Tree. Remember that? All the funds and royalties will go to the liberation movements. You know what? That's fine. They did whatever they thought was right, and I respect that too. But Sweden is not one of my favorite places in life. There was an incident there, but I'm not talking about it. I think also it was in Sweden, wasn't it? Where a South African woman who joined Mossad and went after those Munich terrorists. Think of 1972. Operation Wrath of God, I think they called it. And they killed the wrong man there. She was actually saying it was the wrong man, and she got captured, and then she married her attorney, I think, and lived for long in peace, and she's buried now in Israel. In fact, we were thinking of making a documentary on her, but nothing came of it. About Operation Wrath of God, I do describe it in some of my books, and it might be shocking to you, but from an intelligence viewpoint, I think it was a load of nonsense. The one country in the world who actually stands out for this type of thing of murdering people outside a court of law. And ironically enough, Israel don't have a death penalty. It doesn't exist there. I think they sort of had to change the law to kill one of the SS people, which they caught somewhere in South America, Eichmann, which they been hanged, and they didn't know how to do it. Because it's not in their culture to do it. It's like Dr. Eric Solomon always say to you, save a life, you save a nation. And it's very true, you know. I'm married to a Jewish woman, or from a Jewish home. Fantastic people. My father was Jewish because his mom was Jewish. I spoke to you about this before, even though I'm not. But no, I don't think much of this idea of going out and killing people all the time. More than 3,000 people has been killed like that by Mossad and other agencies. And I don't rate Mossad highly either. I've seen them in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and they stand out like a fish on the water. They're not good. They're really not good. But you have to read my books. There's about 12, 13 of them talking about them and combined operations, which might have taken place or might not. I'm not saying everything in the books are true and honest God truth, and so help me God. I'm not saying that, but I will say to you, whatever you read there's very good reasons why it's written in those books, and every book has about 600 pages of research behind it. So they're really, really different. But no, they're not that good. In the Middle East, they're very good. But their problem is they became arrogant. They became like, they started following their little uncle, you know, the US of A, the second beast of the Bible. They started following them and all their things, and yeah, that's why 7 October happened. Even though there's a lot of people who actually would tell you that they were praying for it to happen. But I'm not going in there. All I'm saying to you is there is a South African connection, I think, to Sweden. But it might have been Norway, I'm not too sure. If I'm wrong, guys, please forgive me, I'm talking out of my head. But it is a fantastic story, and more than one movie has been made about it. I understand it was been sort of banned, and you can still get hold of it if you know the right people. So, the Stockholm Syndrome, you know, the Swedish people are really good people, even if I think they are sometimes a bit woke, and they went totally overboard with their open lifestyle of accepting everything and love and peace and all sorts of crap. Because sometimes it's necessary to defend yourself. It's necessary to defend your borders, isn't it? Otherwise, you're not a country. You're part of a global elite, big corporation. That is why Donald Trump won his second presidential election, and God knows what will come from that. Because Donald Trump is not as innocent as you think he is. He's probably a Jesuit in disguise. Again, if you read my books, we talk about him in great detail. We see the signs, you know. We see a man, Protestant, kneeling in a Catholic church. That doesn't happen. We see a man who's married to a very serious Catholic. That is not a problem. We see a man who went to Jesuit schools and who sent his children to Jesuit schools. Why? Why? Why would a Protestant do that? Ask these questions, guys. I want you to think a bit more outside of the box. Don't just accept whatever is being fed to you. Even me, if I say these things to you, man, go and research it. Read my books. And if you don't agree with it, you don't. But at least you went out and you tried a bit to educate yourself, because there's definitely things happening in the back of the world. I could never understand why the US of A, who again is the second beast, is the one who's supporting Saudi. And if you think about it, 9/11 terrorists, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, all those people are Sunni Muslims, so they are mostly supported by Saudi money. And Qatar, I think, is the other one. But not Iran. Iran is Shia. They don't like each other. It's like Catholics and Protestants in the old days, you know. There's almost a state of war. Millions died. And that's wrong too. You shouldn't die because somebody don't like your religious beliefs or whatever. That's stupid, man. God has never forced anybody to go one way or the other way. It's a one of choice. It's freedom of choice. That's why you have it. That's why you can even be an atheist. I don't care. Really, I don't care. But it makes no sense unless you think there's perhaps a bigger thing on in the background. And that's exactly what happened at Stockholm. There was a bank which got robbed at the Kreditbanken in Stockholm. And this was in 1973. There's a movie out on it. I haven't seen the movie. I'm not interested in Hollywood crap. Refuse to look at it. The first time I hear, oh my God, I switch it off and I walk away. You don't speak the Lord's name in vain like that in my presence. I will react. Or you have this, oh, you know what? You know what the Hollywood actually is? Do you understand that the word Holly refers to the wood? It's a type of tree, the wood of this magic wand which witches and things use. You think that's by chance? If you read some of my books, you'll find out how far Hollywood and the US military and US intelligence is working together. It's amazing. In fact, their script has to be approved by the US military or they will not get any assistance. And yeah, it is total propaganda. It doesn't matter if an actor sits there and he says he's anti-war and things like that. No, go and look at the movies he plays. Is it really anti-war? How many hundreds of people die in the first 10 minutes of that video, of that movie? It is these type of things which makes no sense. And then it is shocking. It is shocking when you start finding these things out and you find out how they're playing you every day. Guys, you've got to wake up. Because this is serious stuff. At some stage it's gonna attack you. Slowly but slowly. But anyway, let us not go there. I can talk about that in another video if somebody is interested. And most are not. But what is shocking to me is that these people being started having this relationship, some say it even became sexual between the hostage takers there at the credit bank in Stockholm, and that's where it comes from. Because when the police came in to arrest these people, they were sort of begged don't arrest them. I understand they didn't want to testify against them, all sorts of things. A total weird way of thinking about it. There's another story. I'm going to play you a clip here. And guys, it's possible that YouTube, of course, then will attack us here. And if they do, then I will just move this entire video over to Rumble and Odyssey. Odyssey, by the way, has no ads. That's the nice thing about it. Well, Rumble, I understand, has so many ads that people are complaining about it to me, but guys, I can do nothing about it. It's the same with YouTube. I cannot stop the ads. It's one of the things I moan about every now and then because I know how annoying it is. But that's the way it is. So I'm going to play you a clip out of James Bond movie. I think it's the last one with Sean Connery, Sir Sean, where he played. It's called Never Say Never Again. It's the beginning of it. It's only about 1 minute 40. So let's have a look at that. Because that is a classic example of Stockholm Syndrome. Okay, so what happened? You have a James Bond, a very experienced agent, MI6. We don't rate them highly, by the way. We don't think much of MI6 in the field. In the background of their code breaking and things, they had government school for code breakers or whatever they have. They're quite good, but there's only about 300 of them. So they and no such agency, NSA, how they are actually monitoring the world is fascinating because they use artificial intelligence, things like that. Again, it's in some of my books, but let's stick to the topic. What you see here is James Bond came in and he overcame all these guards, which is nonsense. And then he rescues this beautiful woman, which is also nonsense because most of those you rescue are just normal people and older. They are really, many of them are not, most of them are not beautiful and young. And so she stabs him. And then that's your Stockholm Syndrome. And it's very important for you to remember that every one of the people who are coming to rescue you, the rescue people, whether they police, army, doesn't matter, intelligence even. The Russians, for instance, are very well known that they have special forces inside the intelligence units, and they will come and rescue you. And they have their own way of doing things, and they are fairly good. They're actually very good. And very tough. Medoners, I would actually say. But anyway, they well trained in this, so they're going to treat you as if you have that. And we're going to talk about that in the next video when we talk about the actual rescue. Where we're also going to play videos, and if it's possible, once again, guys, I don't know, when I talk here, I haven't edited it yet, and I haven't put it out yet on YouTube, and if YouTube gives me any hassle about it, bingo, bye-bye, Rumble, Odyssey. And that's just the way it's going to be. It's very important, the Stockholm Syndrome, because in Africa you are held in groups. Remember, I kept on saying that to you. I said to you, it's not like the mafia style, where you're kept in a single room and things like that. You're normally kept in a group. And the FBI statistics, as far as you can trust the FBI, says that about 27%, let's say one-third of people will turn within 4 or 5 days. Isn't that amazing? You will turn and become a victim of the Stockholm Syndrome. So if you are captured and you are put with other people, under no circumstances can you trust them too far. Simply because they might have turned and they probably did turn. And so just be careful there. Another well-known movie where the Stockholm Syndrome comes out without them even knowing it probably is A Bridge Over the River Kwai. Now, in the future, next year, well, this year, because you're only going to see this next year, a few months from now, I do intend to take Rebecca and our car and drive all the way north to River Kwai and make a video for us for Legacy on those wartime scenarios and scenes there and museums and things. I would love to see it. But you will remember that the colonel there, right at the end, he discovers the explosives. And he actually goes mad. He starts running and he tries to defuse the explosives. He tries to get it out of a way. He doesn't want his bridge to be blown up. James, that makes no sense. That's an enemy bridge. It's got to be blown up. And now you're preventing your own side from blowing it up. Stockholm Syndrome. That's why he started then saying, talking to himself, because he realized there's something wrong with it. Very good movie, by the way. Very good movie. Another interesting case is Patty Hearst. She still is, she's still alive. As a young woman, she was captured by some terrorist, I believe, in the US, and she was kept, and she was. Then the next moment, they start seeing Patty Hearst is openly, without covering her face, nothing. She has joined this group. She's robbing banks. And makes no sense. Makes no sense unless you understand the Stockholm Syndrome. Then she got captured and sent to jail for a long time. Frankly, as a legal man, I must tell you, I don't understand why she was sent to jail, because she was definitely a victim of the Stockholm Syndrome. And in our time, this was in the 70s, in our time, when George Bush, 43, a member of secret societies, as was his dad. Fascinating how all these presidents belong to secret societies, isn't it? What did Jesus say? Did he ever do something in secret? No. Did he preach openly? Everybody could hear him? Yes. Yeah, think about it. Read my books. You'll be surprised what comes out in terms of the US, the second beast, founding fathers. All of them except one perhaps, was part of these secret societies, Freemasons, whatever. Who controls them? That's a question you need to ask. Who controls these people? Where does it go back to? Very, very fascinating, because all these things just stick together. And in one of the books, Kote Masamole 26, I think, I have the entire chapter on how the US was created. And I use the word created. That's what I use. It didn't just get to be. It had to be created, and it was created. And it is said that there was a General Ricky, who was a Jesuit commander, because it's a military order, that's why he's a general. Even though he was also a professor, he created the US. Want to know why? Go and read the book. Fascinating. You can read Oath of Evil too. I've repeated the chapter inside it, because it's very, very interesting how these things get together. But anyway, when George Bush was inaugurated, they had to wait because Billy Goat Clinton was late, as always. Slick Willie, Billy Goat, as I call him, because this is a man who you cannot leave under any circumstances alone with your wife. I saw the man. I was actually at functions where he was. We were there to observe a Secret Service. Stand away from that vehicle, sir. Oh my word, they're not good. They're pathetic. There's nothing good about the US Secret Service. Sorry to blow your whistle or whatever, but no. What we've seen there, totally not good. They will not survive against a dedicated sniper team. I think in one of my books, codenamed Poire Angelique. It's French, Poire Angelique, for Angelique. Well, the book is written in English, but that's French. And in that book, I describe exactly, they have this tactic where they talk about a rush defense. In other words, the shot is fired, the target or the principal is then rushed away. Of course, he's pummeled into a vehicle or behind a podium, and people jump on him to protect him with their bodies. Won't work, by the way. Depends on the rifle you're using. And then they rush it. Then they have like a counter-assault force. And these guys, in this like typical gung-ho, they come there and they form a skirmish line and they walk further, shooting automatic all the time. The idea then is they distract attention away from the sniper towards them, and in the meantime the rest of the guys can escape. Work very well against a lone gunman, a criminal. Will it work against a dedicated team going to kill? No. If you read that book, you will see how we will counter ambush them and I will wipe them all out. No problem. I can deal with that. And I wrote those things to warn. I didn't write those things to give away any secrets, because I knew from the training scenarios and what was ingeoefend that we can defeat that easily. Does that type of thing happen? Yes. At one stage in the country, I believe there were 2 Zimbabwean killer squads, whatever you want to call them, former special forces people, and they have good special forces people. They kept the traditions, very good special forces people, and they were in the country killing dissidents. And you know what? The only way that actually made it out on the news is when some organization had to go to a court of appeal in Bloemfontein to force a court order on the SAPS to actually do their duty and arrest these people or chase them down, which of course I never did. Why do I know that? A family member of mine was part of the legal teams doing that. So this happened. And my theory is that if you're against a lone gunman, that's one thing. If you are against a dedicated special forces team coming after you, goodbye. You're dead. US Secret Service trying to protect you, ach, sies toch, you're dead. Now, George Bush and Slick Willie, you had to wait for him because Bill Clinton was still signing, pardons as the US president can do. And one of the people he pardoned, I'm very glad to inform you, was Patty Hearst, because she should never have been found guilty. It is nonsense. You can see she was turned. And a lot of the time with the Stockholm Syndrome also, how they turn you is sexual abuse. That's the other thing which you'll find, and I've seen that in the police in my own time, is that, man, you find this woman and she's been beaten up by her husband, and then you want to murder this guy and take him, and take him to the cells, and then you give a guy, say, a pack of Lexington, what's those cigarettes? Lexington cigarettes. They will do a lot of that, and then they're working even further. Or so they say. I'm not admitting that. I'm just saying, could have happened. And they need taught a bit of manners in life. But the woman just would never do that. She would never allow her husband to be taken. She just wouldn't. So sometimes, and this is also alleged, it's not to say it happened, you would call the guy out to the street, out of his house, and when he's in the street, you just speak very softly, and then he comes closer to you, and then you murder him, boom, because he invaded your private space, and he resisted arrest, and he's wrong, and then you just work him, because there you have him. He's not in his own house where he can be drunk anymore. But guys, they suffer from Stockholm Syndrome. I'm sad to say the abused wife syndrome, the same thing in my eyes. I'm not a psychologist, I'm just saying there's a lot of rampant and things over it. So how do you prevent it? I spoke to a very experienced psychologist about it, and they all said to me that you have to keep focus and keep reality. You have to understand that even if these people are nice to you, they are not nice to you because they're really your mates. They're not your mates. They're holding you, and you're in deadly danger. They can kill you, abuse you, do all sorts of things to you. So you have to be awake to this. You have to understand, and also have to understand the people around you might have been turned. The police negotiators, again, go and look what Andre Olivier had to say. They will remind you of reality. They will say something to you, the 4 things we want to know, how many, how are you, those things. But they will also work in and say something like, your wife sends her regards. You can remember you actually have a wife outside. You're not just stuck in this little world, where you find yourself. Now you have to let your brain flow and remember the reality. That's how I say you can overcome this and resist it and be aware. The moment you start really liking these people, no. For me, it was always like, am I willing to kill him if I get the chance and I think I'll get away with it? If the answer in my head is, I don't know, he's not such a bad guy, these are poor people, they're just trying to make money, or, they've got a good cause, actually, if you think about it, bingo, you're going on the wrong track. The answer should be yes, by all means and any means necessary. Get a chance to kill you, I'm going to kill you. That's how it should be, because you don't show that emotion. You're just nice. Of course, you're nice and talk about the soccer team. And now the question arises, does it really matter? Does it really matter if you suffer from this? Is it really that important? Again, I spoke to a psychologist and they came out with 2 answers. They said yes and no. He said it's a good thing for you to understand what's happening to you, otherwise you can't combat it. But on the other hand, they say if you really should go over and now you're rescued, will it really affect you afterwards? They say no. They say they can treat this. They can, the moment you're out of that milieu and you're out of those circumstances and you're in your new place, depending on the person, once again, guys, it depends on the person, right? And how long you've been held and things like that. And many people suffer to readjust. That's why some of them were rescued and they got arrested for smoking weed because they got addicted while they were in captivity. We have great sympathy. Some of them will have bursts of anger or post-traumatic stress, that type of thing, which we all suffer out, but it can be treated. It's not a life sentence. It can be treated. What cannot happen? What cannot happen is a Manchurian candidate. I write about that in one of my books as well. And the Manchurian Candidate is actually a book which was written and then became a major movie. I think it was just after the Korean War. And the Korean War is an interesting war because not a single Allied prisoner ever escaped. And why didn't they escape, man, is very difficult if you're white and big and you're in a place like Korea, which is North Korea, which is underfed. The people there are smaller even than normal Koreans. And what we've seen here in Phuket is that the Chinese people are getting quite big now. It's not uncommon for us to see Chinese people 6 foot tall and not fat. They're just big. So it seems to me that, in the last 20 years, 25 years, 50 years, the Chinese Communist Party got 600 million people into the middle class. that is why that economy cannot be stopped, despite what you read in the newspapers. It cannot be stopped. And it is massive, and they have a massive navy. I write about it in code name. There's so many of these books, I'll have to go and see first which one it was, forgive me. But I write about it in the book which is going to follow now. And that's very fascinating because we look at the US Navy versus the Chinese Navy, and let me tell you, the US Navy is not coming out well. It's not coming out well because it's overused, it is old, it's getting dilapidated, they cannot keep it running, they have to take ships out of commission because they don't have people. They're just not as good as people think they are. The air defense systems, for instance, are pathetic. It's not as good as the Chinese ones. It's amazing. Anyway, you can go and read about that. It's very serious because the only thing which keeps the US safe is the US Navy. It's a naval power, it's not an army power. By the way, people like Colonel McGregor and other clever people, Scott Ritter, those people will actually tell you it is not a military power in the sense of an army. It's a naval power and air force power. And if you take away the Navy and the Air Force, which is really sucks, I had to laugh because also which came out in that book is that you can track by radar the F-35 stealth, which it's not stealth. You can track that thing at about 400 kilos. How do we know that? The Chinese Navy did it with phased array radar, which they have on all their ships now. Where did they get that technology? Tel Aviv, from Israel. They got that technology from Israel, and then they just improved it because they're clever people. About 90% of the PhDs in IT as well as in engineering at the top US university, all from China. And guess where these young professors go to? They don't stay in the US, they leave, they go back. What do you think is going to happen 10 years from now? We're so far ahead with artificial intelligence and quantum computers, also coming out in the GMJ books, that they can work out scenarios and weapon systems which the Americans doesn't even have on the drawing board. Hypersonic. Yeah, they're really not as great as they think they are. It just isn't. Anyway, the book I was talking about is called Codename Lucy. And you really have to read that book if you want to know where South Africa stands in BRICS and why South Africa is in BRICS. And why South Africa is so critically important. It's because where it is, it controls that sea route. And that is why the Chinese have a military base in Zimbabwe, besides a whole bunch of satellites to do spying, besides the one South Africa have at silver mines. And they have a major military base there to reinforce South Africa. Anyway, the Manchurian Candidate is a fascinating story because this guy was then in the book now, was captured by the Koreans, and then he got turned, then he was released, he got home to America, and a few years later they flash a signal, and now he becomes like a Korean agent or a Soviet agent or Chinese agent, doesn't matter, he's going to kill the president. As I said to you in Codename Wrangler, there is no benefit in killing a president. A president is replaceable. He's a third man. He smells of what he talks. He floats on what he talks. He's unimportant. If you want to hurt a country, go and kill the spy masters. They are important. Go and kill the submarine commanders. They are important. The fighter pilots, any pilot. Staff officers, very important people. But the president, please. No one cares about the president. And that story of taking a bullet for the president, you're an idiot. I will never order my people to do that. You do your best, but if it's his time, let him die. I don't care. Couldn't care less. But that's a Manchurian candidate, and they say that basically this comes from the Stockholm Syndrome, where he's being turned and then he becomes a Manchurian candidate. And the real life one which they always use, and they say where this actually happened in a different way, is a guy called George Blake. Now, George Blake had a different name. His real name was George B.R. He was a Dutch Netherlands intelligence officer. He joined MI6 in, I think, 1944. He was 22 years old. Then he was a good intelligence officer. There's no doubt that George Blake was a good one. He might still be alive in Moscow. I'm not too sure. He might be, but then he's extremely old. Or he might be dead, like Kim Philby. But this is his story, and he got captured in Korea with the Korean War. He was kept in isolation. He became a communist. They started feeding him communist books. They started showing him the better side of communism. There is such a thing. And so he turned. But one of his problems in life was, and this is seldom mentioned, is that when he was at MI6, he was at the Dutch desk. Now, you will remember in a previous episode, I said to you that things went horribly wrong there. The Germans started playing radio games with them because they captured everybody, and then they would turn this guy and they would arrange for a further drop and a further drop, and until they had the entire Netherlands, the Dutch desk was totally under German control. I think the German in charge there was a Colonel Giske or something like that. I might be wrong. It's in my books as well. If you've written dozens of books, guys, you cannot remember every word in every book. So forgive me if I jump around, but it's important for me to tell you, because you can go and read further in those books. You will find what actually is the story. And of course, any book of me which you actually buy or listen to when you bought it, the money comes back to legacy. That's how we support ourselves, besides the Patreons. So this George Blake, he fell in love while he was at MI6 with a secretary there. I have a name, but I'm not going to mention it here. Doesn't matter. And she rejected him, because he was Jewish. Now, in those days, during the wartime years, serving in MI6 was actually a bit of an in thing for the social elite. You know, they all had to serve somewhere, and so many of them, especially the women, became secretaries and things at MI6. And the high and mighty, you know, the hoi polloi, or whatever you call them. And George Blake took this very, very seriously, and he had a resentment, like a grudge, against the entire British system, which any decent man will have. And so he turned, you know, he became a communist. And when they got him back after the war, you wouldn't believe, they actually reappointed him in MI6, and he carried on as a career officer. Now, that will never happen today. It should never happen, because you cannot trust that person ever again. I'm sorry to say that to you. It should never have happened. So he betrayed what they called Operation Gold, and you can read about this in Codename Bella Dawn. For those interested, the words Bella and Dawn actually refers to people I know or used to know. One of them is dead. And so the books have like code names in it. Every code, every word there has a meaning. So if you read a book code named Rebecca 65, well, you know who Rebecca is. And if you read Lucy, well, you've seen Lucy on Legacy as well. You've seen her. But Operation Gold was interesting. This was in West Berlin. They built a tunnel that became known as the Berlin Tunnel, and they built it underneath right into East Berlin. And they started tapping the wires, and they started listening into what the Russians, the Soviet Union, and the East Germans were saying. But sadly, because of George Blake, the Russians and the Soviet Union, they always knew about it. And they say that the KGB never informed the Soviet army about it, the Red Army, to keep Blake safe. But at some stage, we all know that the tunnel was discovered, and they also were feeding the Western intelligence a bunch of nonsense. Yeah, that's that world, man. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. So George Blake got caught, and he was sent to 42 years in prison, which was a record sentence in the UK. I think up to today even. And then he escaped. He actually escaped. After a year or two in prison, or a few years, he escaped. He made his way to Moscow, and there he still is. Point I'm trying to make is that chances of something like the Stockholm Syndrome turning into a Manchurian candidate, and then he's getting hypnosed in some way to kill the president is bullshit. It is fiction. It will not work. The only way you can be hypnotized to go and do something is you would have done it anyway. In other words, you're a type of person, you're a weak person in the first place because you allow your mind to be taken over. It's anti-Bible as well. It takes away your freedom of choice, which is why I'm so violently against the idea of being hypnotized. I cannot be, I will not allow it. But a lot of people do it, and then of course, especially in shows, and especially when you talk to people and these evangelists, these big preachers, especially when you start talking to them, you see they use the same methods. They use the same methods to hypnotize. Let me say again to you that is unbiblical. It is not what God wanted. Freedom of choice. Stay away from such crap. But George Blake himself, of course, was not a Manchurian candidate. And by the way, the entire book, The Manchurian Candidate, was plagiarized from another book. So it's not even a genuine book. It came out, I think, in 1998. That it was plagiarized from a book called Claudius or something like that. Right, guys, that's a Stockholm Syndrome. I really hope you understand it now. Let's talk about the Lima Syndrome. Now, the Lima Syndrome is not as well known as Stockholm. Most of you will know about the Stockholm Syndrome, but Lima Syndrome is the damn opposite. In the Stockholm Syndrome, the hostage falls in love with his hostage taker. Perhaps not fall in love, but you know what I mean. Totally the different scenario with Lima Syndrome. You have a hostage taker falls in love with a hostage. Yeah, that does not happen often. That happens extremely seldomly. It almost never happens. But that actually happened because in Lima, in Peru, there was an incident. People say it was at the Japanese embassy. In fact, it wasn't. It was at the Japanese residence. In other words, where the ambassadors lived. And they had like a party. Remember, I told you that the embassy people are not there to do work. They are there to get drunk and late and talk nonsense, and that's all they do. They are not there to assist you. Just my opinion. I might be wrong, but I have no confidence and even less faith in them. But the who's who, of course, of the diplomatic scene arrived there at the ambassador's house, and then they got taken hostage. And you would believe that whatever they wanted, they could have gotten now because, they got like the US people, they've got who is there, they got important people. But for some reason, they started releasing them. Would you believe? They started releasing the hostages, even the best hostages. They started releasing them. And then it came out, they started calling it the Lima Syndrome, where, they just too kind. They shouldn't be hostage takers. There's something wrong with them. But if that happens, fantastic, man. If I want to release you, thank you, sir, goodbye, God bless. When you walk out, you walk to a straight as the first intelligence officer, you tell him everything about them. And that's the problem which the terrorists have when they kidnap South Africans. Most of you have military experience. Most of you can look at a man differently than any other man. What do I mean by that? If we look at something like somebody like Frans Fourie, we immediately notice we see his 4 reconnaissance regiment badge on him. We see the operator's badge. We see his Honoris Crux. We see his parachute wings. With some of them, like my friend Jack Greef, we see the free fall wings, I believe. If I'm wrong, Jack, please forgive me. Definitely General McGill, Alexander McGill, Alexander. Always get confused. You can see, you can read from a man's chest that he's capable of doing free fall, military free fall. You can see he's been in combat. You know he's an operator. So you read him, and it's the same in civilian life. You people who served in Afghanistan and Iraq, most of you reported back to the South African Secret Service. And thank you for that. It's very kind of you. There's nothing wrong with that. You should be loyal to your own country. And you can look at soldiers and you can immediately say, these guys are, please, too fat, too overweight, too trigger happy, carrying too much weight in equipment. Equipment is not well maintained. You can see such a lot of things, and it is exactly the same with hostage situation. You have to observe. You have to see the weaknesses. You have to see what weapons, what explosives, how well trained are they, who's the leader group, how do they communicate, is there harmony amongst them? You know, all these type of things. We're going to ask you. We're going to debrief you. We want to know these things. Anyway, so in Peru, it went on for months and months, and then the attack took place, and every single hostage taker was killed. That happens quite often, actually. It's almost a general rule. None of them survive. Where were they killed? Well, let's talk about that in the next episode. I'm also going to play you a little 3-4 minute clip here. This was taken during the actual attack. As you can see, there were nothing special forces about it. It's just basically storming the place, the compound, and just shooting. It's a bloody miracle that not more people died, except the hostage takers. But let's have a look at it again, guys. If YouTube starts giving me trouble about that, over to Rumble and Odyssey.
Ahí hay rehenes, loco, están sacando rehenes. En la escalera.
Anyway, that's the story of Lima Syndrome. There is another one which I can describe to you because it's in one of the books called Rebecca 65. It deals with train hijackings, which is it's a difficult thing. It's as difficult as a ship. Aircraft is easy, in my eyes. It's bread and butter work. Trains are more difficult, and ships, of course, are very difficult for the assaulting team. But there used to be in the Netherlands a terrorist group called the Self-Moluccans, Self-Moluccans. And basically it comes down to these people being moved from the east back to Holland because some of the countries got independent. They wanted to stay Dutch, they couldn't. They started the movement. And now they were trying to get the Dutch government to give him their land back, which of course the Dutch government couldn't do. So they did two things. They captured the train, and at the same time they captured the school. It's described in the book because as a terrorist movement they were fairly bad. They were not good, they were not ruthless enough, but they were clever. They were smart people. So they would never attack a single target. They would take a school with children, and they would take also the train. Now, the Dutch are extremely proud of the way that their special forces and army actually stormed the train. In fact, it was most pathetic. I read about it, I wrote about it in that book, Rebecca 65, and probably others. The way they did this is by simply shooting. They had no regard for the hostages whatsoever, just fired like thousands of shots right into the train. That is their way of doing it. Oh, shame. And at the school, though, something happened which can be classified as the Lima Syndrome. After a day or two, this is 1977, the school children got ill. They had like a stomach bug or something, and so they released them all. 105 children they released, and they just surrendered. I must tell you, that's the trick of a trade. If you're a hostage taker and you receive food from the police or anybody, definitely that food will be spiked to make you run to the toilet more often than not. But that's the Lima Syndrome, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. It's fascinating, these things, because it can happen. And then lastly, I just briefly want to talk about should you escape or not. We mentioned it so many times before. Should you take the gap and run if you can? The answer is yes, you should if you can get away with it. But if you can't, you can't. Because there's going to be serious consequences if you are captured. But the question more often asked is, are you obliged to do it? Is there a duty on you? And the answer is no, there's no duty on you to escape. Remember, you're not in the army anymore. You're not a serving officer, or even if you are, you're not one now. So there's no duty upon you to escape. But again, if you can escape and without endangering anybody, or especially yourself, then kindly do so. Right. The next episode is a fascinating one. There will also be videos in it where we talk about the actual rescue phase. And that's what we've been building up all the time. To get here, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Spread the word. And if you have an interesting topic or something you claim to have some knowledge on, come and talk to me. Let us see if we can share the knowledge between the legacy people. Because no one else is going to take care of us. We take care of ourselves. That's a good way of thinking about it. God bless. Until we meet again.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive notifications.